Our New Testament reading today comes from Matthew chapter 17, verses 1 through 9. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud a voice said, "This is my Son, the beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Get up and do not be afraid." And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them, "Tell no one about the vision until after the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." As I was starting to work on this sermon, my husband had the show Flea Market Flip on television. It's a show that comes on the HGTV channel. Any other HGTV junkies in the house? Yeah, I love that show. In this show, 2 teams are working to buy, repurpose, and sell 3 different pieces that match themes that are given to them at the start of the show. On one episode, there was a team that bought a large 1920s water storage barrel that resembled a large nuclear waste barrel. Like, it was about this big and that big around. And they were like, "Should we touch it?" But it only held water, so they decided to go for it. They bought it for a grand total of $2. Fabulous. By the end of the show, they had managed to completely transform and renew it into a chic side table bar that sold for $162. The transformation was unexpected. Because you see, after they bought this barrel, everyone, including themselves, were wondering how it could possibly be transformed into something chic, which was the challenge. When it was brought into the studio where the teams and craftsmen worked together, they just didn't really have a plan for how they were going to use this barrel. It underwent a creative, transformative process. The team went through a couple of iterations of designs before they finally decided to turn the barrel into a bar. A door was cut out on one side and fashioned on part of the barrel. They installed shelving inside the barrel and cleaned everything up to create the storage space for bottles of alcohol, or if you wanted like coffee, some people could use it as a coffee bar. You could put glasses in there and other accoutrements that you might need for whatever you were going to use the bar for. On top of the barrel, they used 2 pieces of wood and some glass to create a beautiful tabletop. The final product was completely surprising and very beautiful indeed. The transformation was unexpected, and even the host of the show said, "I had no idea how this was going to turn out, and I was quite worried." But what was exciting, and what is exciting about this show, is that you never know what kind of transformation those pieces will go through, and if in that transformation it'll turn into a butterfly or into a moth. Today we read about Moses going up to Mount Sinai in our Old Testament passage. That's it. That's the only part of that passage we get, is that he was going up the mountain. God calls Moses and tells him the tablets will be given to him that contain the law and commandments which God's chosen people are to follow. They have been led out of Egypt. They were chased by Pharaoh's army. They walked across the sea on dry land and have followed God as a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, all the way to Mount Sinai. Now the people are facing time without Moses at the helm as he goes up the mountain, and Moses is facing the unknown at the top. In Matthew, we are once again on a mountaintop. This time we are with Jesus, Peter, James, and John, who are joined by Moses and Elijah as Jesus is transfigured before their eyes. Peter, always Peter, not knowing what to say, offers to build 3 dwellings so that they may never leave. I'm sure these dwellings would have become shrines and places of pilgrimage as people came to seek people from their faith that they thought were long gone. But then this mountain, like Sinai, becomes cocooned in a cloud. 2 cloud-wrapped mountains, 2 different eras, 1 pivotal point of change. See, change is a fact of life. We can't stop change from happening. We will turn a year older. Elections go on. Red lights change to green, thank God. But regardless of how we feel about any of the changes that happen, the only thing we can control is how we will respond and react to that change. When I was thinking about the passages this week, for some reason, it was the image of a chrysalis, of a butterfly, and that cocoon that came to me. And it was funny, as I was looking it up, my daughter was sitting next to me, and she became fascinated by the fact that this little worm-looking thing that sometimes looks quite ugly and scary-looking can be wrapped in this cocoon, and then it comes out as a butterfly. Because that little caterpillar, after eating all those leaves and whatever else they like to eat, makes itself a chrysalis. And this chrysalis provides a place for the caterpillar to undergo the work of change so that it then emerges transformed into something completely new and beautiful. But we need not forget that butterflies are not the only ones to undergo this stage. See, moths also have a pupa stage that involves the building of a chrysalis. Yet for some reason, none of us really hold the same love for moths as we do for butterflies. Maybe it's because they like to eat holes in our clothes and do other things like that. But the same process of transformation yields 2 very different reactions for how we treat what emerges. And I think this is where we are today. Unlike the weeks we have had up to now, our passages today that lead us into Lent do not lay out clear marching orders for exactly what we are supposed to be doing. These past weeks we've had, the Sermon on the Mount, we've had clear directions. You really couldn't miss. Even if I read the passages and said, okay, that's our message, and didn't give a sermon, we would all have an idea of what we needed to do. But this week, it's not quite the same. It does not talk about how we love our neighbors, and we do not have parables or stories that we need to untangle. Instead, we're being eased into the journey of transfiguration and change that occurs each Lent. We are now entering into our own cloud-wrapped mountain, our own chrysalis, our place of safety as we learn and transform over the next 40 days. We have worked and learned a lot so far this year about what it means to love our neighbor and to work in, with, and through our community. So this Transfiguration Sunday, we are being invited into the first part of that great commandment. We are being invited and drawn into a space where we learn to love God with all our heart, with all our mind, with all our soul, and with all our strength. Change will happen this Lent, and we get to start choosing now how we will respond to it. See, 40 days is no small amount of time. If you think about it, a lot can happen in 40 days. Floods, temptations, revelations from God. People can forget their God so quickly and create idols, only to have them smashed and destroyed in an instant. 40 days is enough time to build a new habit, or to break an old one that needs to be torn down. This time is what we choose to make of it, co-creating with our Creator God something new with our lives. When Moses would go up the mountain to pray and talk with God, he would wear a veil when he came down, as his face would literally glow with the glory of God from his encounter. This made the people uncomfortable and frightened, so he would hide his face until that glory faded. And the disciples with Jesus on the mountain, they saw Jesus transfigured before their eyes, not so different from Moses. God's glory shone around them, and they saw two of the most important figures of their faith there before their eyes, talking to their teacher, to their friend. If that would not create transformation, I don't know what would. And then they are exhorted by God to listen to Jesus, who then tells them not to tell anyone what they saw until after Jesus was raised from the dead that first Easter morning. They were being prepared for what was to come. They were in the Chrysalis and didn't know it. But we get the benefit of knowing what we are going into. So how are we going to use our time? How are we going to prepare ourselves this year for this Lenten season? We have this time of fasting and preparation before us. This Wednesday is Ash Wednesday. We are on our way up the mountain where we will be cocooned for 40 days and 40 nights. We will walk on a journey. Some of us will give up something and practice the spiritual discipline of fasting. It doesn't have to be from food. I've known people who've given up electronics and their cell phone habits. It's hard to break. I've known people who've given up specific types of food, say fried food. There are many different ways to fast. And during your fasting, anytime you want that fried Chick-fil-A sandwich, you think, no, I cannot. I have chosen to give that up. And it's a reminder to pray to God and give thanks for what you have and to grow. Or if you're not on Facebook, you use that time for prayer instead. But then other people will take on a new practice. Maybe instead of giving something up, you're taking on a new spiritual discipline. You're taking on a devotional time, or you're deepening your prayer life, or learning to meditate. Regardless, it's a way that we learn to walk humbly with our God in this season. Transfiguration is happening. Change is coming. But when we break out of the chrysalis on Easter Sunday with that final triumphant push, where will we find ourselves? Are we going to be beautiful butterflies who have grown, who have changed, who have learned, and who are now ready to take flight? Will we be those who spread joy and hope? Or will we find ourselves as moths who have gone through the same thing but come out dull and gray and have the tendency to destroy rather than bring joy? We control how we respond to change. The choice is ours this season. So welcome into the chrysalis, and may God meet us here. Amen.